I want to talk a little bit about how backup contracts work and why, as a buyer, you always want to put in a backup contract. Let me tell you why this works. Number one, it doesn't cost you anything as a buyer, because what happens when you go under a backup contract here in Georgia is you may not even have to put earnest money down until you get a call from the listing agent and they say, hey, the primary buyer is gone. You're now the primary buyer, so everything starts. The other two things are you're not obligated to start any due diligence or to spend any money on your due diligence or your efforts towards, getting your financing cleaned up. You don't have to order appraisal or anything until you're named the primary buyer. And third of all, you can get out of it still. You may get a phone call in 2 or 3 weeks from somebody that says, hey, you're now the primary buyer on such and such. And you think, oh yeah, I forgot I put a backup contract on that. Guess what? More than likely, you have a due diligence period that began at the moment you got that notice until the time frame you set in your contract that your due diligence period was. And guess what you do during your due diligence period? You can terminate for any reason whatsoever here in Georgia. We used to have inspection periods like a lot of other states have, where it says, hey, you can only get out of this contract if there's something going on with the house that you and the seller can agree to work out, condition-wise or repair-wise. They'd have these crazy inspection reports that would end up stigmatizing the property, and it would force the sellers to disclose this to future buyers, and it just wasn't true. So that's exactly what happened with me a couple of weeks ago. I'm working with a wonderful set of buyers that loved the storybook house in a neighborhood near here in Decatur. We were the very first ones to submit an offer. But we also did plenty of investigation very quickly before we submitted our offer. There is a stream right in front of this house. It is named on the map, and there is a riparian buffer on that stream. And we didn't get the property after we submitted our offer. And they were so disappointed, but I said, hey guys, let's turn this into a backup if the seller is accepting backups. And we did, and the seller signed it. 3 days later, I got a call from the agent, and she said, hey, I think we've got a problem with our primary contract. They wanted to extend the house backwards, and they're just now finding out they can't because the house is within a riparian buffer. Guess what? We already knew that. And now the primary buyer is just finding out. And she said, are your buyers planning on doing any kind of extension on the house? Because I really don't want us to have the same problem all over again. No, they're not. We already knew that there was a riparian buffer on this house. Okay, I think this buyer is going to terminate. And they did. I have champagne in my closet that I use for closing gifts, and I grabbed a bottle of champagne, put a little ribbon on it that said congratulations, and then I drove over to their house, and they opened the door, and I had the champagne, and they said, what's going on? And I said, check your email. Oh my gosh, we got the house? And I said, yes, you did the right thing. You investigated everything you needed to know about the house. You became extremely informed buyers. They beat you out on price, but when they started doing their due diligence, they found out what you already know. They terminated their contract. You are automatically now the primary buyer. So never skip an opportunity to put a backup contract on the property you want. Get a hold of your emotions, think practically and think logically. If you don't put in a backup contract, there's another buyer right behind you that they're calling next to be in backup contract status. One of the reasons that it's really important to be in backup contract on a house that you want is because in this market, at least 1 out of every 3 to 1 out of every 4 contracts terminate before the buyer gets to the closing table. Usually it's because either A, some things came up on inspection that the buyer couldn't get over, or B, they find out after offering this particular price in this municipality that they didn't check out what the property taxes were and they didn't check out how much it would actually cost to live there. They speak to their lender, and their lender gives them a revised estimate of how much their monthly mortgage payments are going to be. Concessions in lieu usually means that the seller is now contributing some more money to their closing costs. That will at least offset this new dollar information that they have that they are scared that they might not be able to afford. They say, wow, my mortgage payment is going to be higher. If I at least get a ton of money to help out with my closing costs, maybe I can stomach this. And the seller may say no. If we do find some things out from that buyer and their inspector that we didn't have disclosed before, we're going to have to update the seller's property disclosure statement and put that new information out there. Now, the faster you make an adjustment, the faster you can get over that stigma, right? Most of the time when I'm working with sellers, one of the reasons that I want to get backup contracts is so we don't lose momentum and we don't have to simply go back to market and explain ourselves to the market. We have a backup buyer who's ready to take over if the primary decides to take a hike.